Hello everyone, you are watching a snippet of the November 14th, 2022 countdown program. Today is Monday. See the full version on Patreon. And thanks to everyone who is becoming our patrons right now. Russian propagandists have been in trouble in recent days. They were left without training manuals and rushed over the bumps in the hope of somehow justifying the failures at the fronts, or at least diverting attention from them. No one explained to the propagandists how to present defeat to the audience in Kherson. Skabe Ava was the first to swim.
No one prepared for such a war. No one expected such a big world war. No one proceeded from the fact that all 50 countries, I apologize for the jargon, will fit in for Ukraine, and our small army is not designed for such grandiose wars.
This is also the question, why?
Propagandist Kiselyov even called the surrender of Kherson fixing on the other side of the Dnieper. The fact that the Rashists are running even further, deep into the occupied territories, Kiselyov does not dare to tell. But the most reliable tool in distracting the plebs from defeat was chosen as Prigozhin's sledgehammer, with a sentimental story about a criminal who surrendered to the armed forces of Ukraine, after which he was released for a walk around Kyiv, where he was allegedly kidnapped and returned to Wagner, where he was executed with a sledgehammer on the head. The propaganda machine of the good Russians moved from the MOP to Prigozhin's sledgehammer at the suggestion of Vladimir Osechkin, a well-known swindler who settled in French Biarritz and was promoted by the FSB under the legend of a human rights activist. The provocateur Osechkin demanded that Zelensky, no more, no less, urgently comment on the situation with the criminal news and executed by the Wagnerites, otherwise he threatened with a scandal in Europe. The general choir of political science propagandists started an oratorio on the topic of the dangerous transit of a label for murder into the hands of a criminal cook. Say, Prigozhin is not just a serious animator, but also a provocateur, playing on the verge of what is acceptable. Feeling the subsidence of the state, Prigozhin allows himself to take away the franchise of violence from the state. Other characters immediately join the scandal organized by the Kremlin special services, as if at the snap of the fingers of their shadow curators. All these pseudo-libertarians, Mikhail Svetov and other, recruited Michael Nux. The fact that a captured Wagnerian could simply be exchanged for captured Ukrainians did not occur to them. And the fact that neither the armed forces of Ukraine nor Zelensky bear responsibility for the further actions of the cave cannibals is not spelled out in the training manual. Yes, the office does not need it. The main thing is that in the swamps there is a howl about nothing, and the topics of defeat on the fronts and riots of the mobilized are defocused. The office loves you. Watch the hands and tongues of good Russians. Become our patrons now and look further in this program. President of Ukraine Zelensky arrived in Kherson, where he raised the state flag in front of the administration building, and the clown Peskov inarticulately gurgled that Kherson continues to be part of Russia. The head of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, Alexei Reznikov, suggested that Crimea could return to Ukraine without hostilities, against the backdrop of worsening problems within Russia. The head of the SVR, Narishkin, rushed to Ankara to beg for at least some kind of peace from the head of the CIA, Burns. Lavrov arrived in Bali and immediately ended up in the hospital with a heart attack. When there are no diplomatic successes and are not expected, one has to lather Lavrov's horse croup, attracting attention to himself with heart problems. Joe Biden and Xi Jinping arrived in Indonesia at night for a meeting of G20 leaders, and today we met in person. Earlier, Chinese Prime Minister Li Keqiang criticized the nuclear rhetoric that the Russian leadership was carried away amid failures in the war with Ukraine. The week-long absence of massive missile strikes against Ukraine is explained by the shortage of weapons, said Yuri Ignat, spokesman for the Ukrainian Air Force. Against the backdrop of the fact that Patrushev returned from Iran empty-handed, there will soon be nothing to shell Ukraine with. And the last one for today. While Putin is hiding in the dark corners of the cave, the Neziger Canal, with which Peskov is associated, radiates optimism. Quote, "The message of the president should be heard against a favorable background of public sentiment. So far, there are no grounds for this, but closer to the new year, Events may occur that will form a charge of social optimism and become a good prologue to Putin's speech. End of quote. What is this positive event for performance? Is it a body removal? By the way, judging by the fermentation that we have already talked about today, it cannot be ruled out that a bald genius may not make it to the end of the calendar year. Sledgehammer to help him. And that's all for today. See the full version of the program on the Patreon resource. And thanks to everyone who is becoming our patrons right now. Hugs to all. See you on Thursday. Glory to Ukraine.